Hey there, friend. If you've ever sat alone in a noisy bar after the worst day of your life, staring into a half-empty glass while the weight of unpaid bills, broken dreams, and unspoken grief pressed down on your chest until you could barely breathe, then pull up a chair right now and stay with me until the very last word. Because this story isn't about some distant stranger, it's about you, about me, about every one of us who's ever felt invisible in a world that demands we stay strong. Tonight, I'm taking you to a dimly lit corner of Chicago where one whispered sentence changed two shattered lives forever. Keep listening, because by the end, you might just discover that the kindness you've been praying for is already waiting in the most unexpected place. Nathan Walker had always been the guy who showed up early, stayed late, and never complained. At 34, he was the quiet backbone of Collins and Associates, the sleek downtown marketing firm where titles meant everything and feelings meant nothing. His days were a blur of spreadsheets, client calls, and forcing smiles while his nights were swallowed by hospital visits to his mother, whose cancer treatments had drained every penny he had saved and then some. The medical bills stacked like bricks on his chest, $47,000 and climbing. His tiny apartment in a crumbling building smelled of cheap instant noodles and regret. That Friday night, after the doctor had quietly warned him that the next round of chemo might be the last his mother could endure without a miracle, Nathan did something he had never done before. He walked into O'Malley's bar on the edge of the Loop, ordered the cheapest whiskey they had, and let the amber liquid burn away the numbness just enough to feel something, anything. The bar was half empty, the kind of place where neon signs flickered like dying hopes, and the jukebox played songs about lost love nobody wanted to hear. Nathan sat at the far end of the counter, shoulders hunched, scrolling through his phone at photos of his mom smiling before the diagnosis stole her light. He didn't notice the woman who slipped in through the side door until she was 2 stools away. Margaret Collins, his boss, the iron-willed CEO everyone feared and respected in equal measure. At 48, she was the picture of polished power, tailored black coat, silver-streaked hair pulled into a flawless chignon, eyes that could freeze a boardroom in seconds. But tonight those eyes looked hollow, like windows into a house that had burned down years ago. She ordered a scotch, neat, and for a long minute neither of them spoke. Then she turned, and her voice, low, steady, but cracking at the edges, cut through the smoky air like a lifeline. "Nathan! I see you." He froze. She knew his name, of course she did, she signed his paychecks. But hearing it here, in this place where he had come to hide, felt like being caught naked in the rain. Before he could stammer an excuse or bolt for the door, she leaned closer, her breath carrying the faint scent of expensive perfume and something heavier, grief. "Tonight's on me," she whispered, sliding her card across the bar. Then came the words that stopped his heart. "Take me home." Not in the way anyone watching might assume. There was no flirtation, no hidden agenda. Just raw, exhausted honesty in her voice. Nathan's first instinct was terror. What if this was a test? What if he lost his job for even being seen with her? But something in her eyes, mirrors of his own exhaustion, made him nod. They left together in silence, the cold Chicago wind whipping between them as they walked the 3 blocks to her penthouse overlooking the river. Inside, the space was beautiful but barren, white walls, modern furniture, and not a single personal photo except one framed image on the mantel, a laughing man with kind eyes, frozen in time. Margaret poured 2 glasses of water this time, sat on the edge of her couch, and finally spoke the truth she had buried for 2 years. "My husband, David, he died right here in this room. Heart attack while we were watching old movies. I sold the house we built together because I couldn't stand the memories. I threw myself into the company like it could fill the hole, but every night I still hear his laugh in the silence. I thought I was hiding it from everyone. Turns out, I was just hiding from myself." Tears slipped down her cheeks, and she didn't wipe them away. Nathan, who had never seen her cry in a decade of working under her, felt his own walls crumble. He told her about his mother, how the treatments were failing, how he was one missed paycheck away from losing everything, how he smiled through meetings while dying inside. For the first time in years, 2 people who had built empires of armor around their hearts sat together and let the truth bleed out. No romance. No scandal. Just 2 broken humans realizing that power and pain could share the same room without destroying each other. By dawn, Margaret had listened more than she had spoken in months. She didn't offer empty promises or corporate platitudes. She simply said, "You've carried this alone long enough. Tomorrow, things change." Nathan left her apartment feeling lighter than he had in years, not because his problems were solved, but because for the first time, someone powerful had seen him and chosen kindness instead of judgment. He didn't know it yet, but that whisper at the bar had cracked open the door to a second chance either of them knew they needed. Monday morning arrived like any other, until it didn't. Nathan walked into the office expecting the usual curt nod from Margaret in the hallway. Instead, she called him into the boardroom alone. The same woman who had once fired people with a single raised eyebrow now looked softer, her eyes still carrying yesterday's shadows but shining with something new, purpose. "I'm stepping down as CEO," she said quietly, the words landing like a thunderclap. The company had been her escape, but after their night of raw honesty, she realized she had been running from grief instead of healing through it. She had already recommended Nathan for a senior creative director position, complete with a salary bump that would cover his mother's next 6 months of treatment, and then some. "You believed in this company when I was too broken to see its heart," she told him. "Now it's time the company believed in you." Nathan's knees nearly buckled. The promotion wasn't just money, it was validation. For years he had been the invisible one, the reliable shadow no one thanked. Now, colleagues who once barely glanced at him were shaking his hand, asking for advice, treating him like the leader he had always quietly been. But the real miracle happened in the months that followed. Margaret didn't disappear. She stayed on as a consultant, showing up at his office every Friday not to check spreadsheets, but to ask about his mother. She visited the hospital with him, brought his mom fresh flowers and stories of her own late husband's courage. Slowly, Nathan's mother began to smile again, not just at the improved care, but at the sight of her son standing taller, carrying less weight on his shoulders. Margaret, too, found her healing in the unlikeliest place, helping someone else. She bought back a small cabin up north, the one she and David had dreamed of retiring to, and started volunteering at a grief support center. The woman who once ruled with iron now led with open hands. One crisp autumn evening, Nathan drove her there himself. They sat on the porch watching the leaves fall, two friends who had once been boss and employee, now simply human. "I almost didn't walk into that bar," she admitted softly. "I almost let the grief win." Nathan smiled, the kind of smile that reached his eyes for the first time in years. "And I almost left before you spoke. But you saw me. You took me home, and brought me back to life." Years later, when Nathan stood on stage accepting an industry award for the campaign that saved the company, he didn't thank the usual executives. He looked straight into the camera, knowing somewhere out there, viewers just like you were watching, and said, "This is for the night a boss whispered tonight's on me and meant it with her whole broken heart. Kindness isn't weakness. Vulnerability isn't failure. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is let someone see the real you, and choose to walk them home anyway." So here we are, friend, at the end of the story, but hopefully the beginning of yours. If you're carrying pain no one knows about, if your boss, your colleague, your neighbor seems untouchable, remember Nathan and Margaret. One whisper, one honest night, one act of seeing can rewrite everything. You never know whose life you're meant to change just by showing up and saying, "Tonight's on me." Stay kind. Stay open. And never forget, the light you need might be waiting in the darkest bar, ready to take you home. Thank you for staying with me until the end. Your story is next.